But really, the only reason I'm sort of mentioning that is to say that I suppose my position, which I think is a very important part of the way I look at things, is a panentheist position, not pantheism, which simply, as you know, means that everything is God and God is everything. There's the sum of everything, but that not God is in everything and everything is in God, which leaves room for God to be more than we can know or say by just summing everything that we believe to be real.
Mm. But I think that position is definitely in tune with the more mystical aspect of the Eastern tradition. You really do have
Absolutely.
an apophatic vision of God, which is central to all the mystical
Exactly.
practices in the Eastern Church. But then there is also, like you said, there is this filling up, I think that's what you see in Dionysius the Areopagite so clearly, is that he does these two extreme movements where he says, no, you cannot say anything which touches God. God is
Mm.
beyond all definition, all name, all being, non-being. He's beyond all things, but at
Yes.
the same time, he is to be found everywhere and hidden behind all phenomena. In all things at the same
Yes.
time.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Um,
I must say I'm probably more than you adherent to the idea of apophasis of the apophatic tradition, which presented me with a problem because at the end of uh, the recent book, which occupied me over the last decade or so, The Matter with Things, at the end I have this chapter on the sense of the sacred, which is, I think, over 100 pages long, so it's really a short book. And I started it knowing that anything that one says about God is going to be wrong, and that therefore whatever I said was going to be in some ways either an idol that got between one and God, or at least a distraction and a falsehood. But the alternative was to say nothing at all about it. And that seemed to me actually a greater betrayal of it, because it's
mm,
better to, as it were, fail the best you can and acknowledge the extent of your failure than to say nothing. Although I was advised by very kind friends and colleagues, don't include this chapter.
mm.
The book contains a lot of interesting philosophy, but people will stop taking you seriously if you write a chapter on the sacred. But anyway, at the end of the day, I did. So there we are.
Yeah, but I think
Just
we're in an interesting position right now in terms of the current, let's say, intellectual space, where the notion
yes.
of apophaticism, when you look at the developments in cognitive science and the way in which people are seeing the limits of definitions and are talking about complexity and emergence, the notion of
Yep.
apophatic thinking is just, it has to rush back in, because we realize that there's
Mm.
almost like a fractal apophaticism, where although we tend to talk about apophaticism in terms of God, there's also a phenomenological apophaticism, which is that all things
Mm.
present themselves as always more than what they are. And so they all call you, there's this calling behind all phenomena, which I think Heidegger
Yes.
was wanting us to get a sense of with his idea of Dasein. And so it seems like it's a
I
good time
agree.
to talk about that.
No, I agree completely. And of course, interestingly, um, the apophatic path is the path that is taken by science itself. Science can never say this is the case. It can only say that as we see things now, we can say that the following things are not the case.
Yeah.
So, in other words, it's always alerting us to things that we should not prefer, but is unable to say this is the truth.
Yeah, and that's interesting, because although that is ingrained in the scientific method itself, it's always
Mm,
betrayed in its popular, the way it's presented in popular world. It's always about,
mm,
science says this, and so now we follow this line.
yes.
Um, I
I don't
wanted
know if
to.
you agree with me, but sorry, I just say, I don't know if you agree with me, but I think that a lot of this is due to the prevalence of talking heads from the biological world. I'm very impressed by the modesty of physicists and their utter readiness to acknowledge the extent of their ununderstanding. But there are a number of people who've become used to the idea that they're obviously very good at molecular biology, and that this gives them the authority to pronounce on whether there's a God or not.
Yeah. We won't name any names. Yeah. No, I think you're probably right.
Absolutely not.
Yeah, I think you're probably right.